Number 3. Question number 3, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, how much has the asset sales program cost, including but not limited to the expenditure on brokers and bankers' fees, the bonus shares, advertising costs, Treasury's internal costs, the costs borne by the companies slated to be sold, the water dispute costs, extra fees to board members and CEOs, and listing fees?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, the Treasury is currently pulling together information on brokers' fees and other recent costs, and like all other costs associated with the program will be released when they are ready. I can remember the most recently published information on the costs reports spending by Treasury of just over $16 million and by all mixed ownership companies of $8.4 million. The member may also be aware this has been part of a process which will mean the government in the next day or so collects $1.7 billion, which will enable us to invest in other public assets.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that the best estimate of the cost of the brokers' fees is about $50 million, that the best estimate of the bonus share giveaway is about $25 million, and the Minister has just identified about another $25 million worth of cost, hasn't the asset sale program so far cost around $100 million?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, that may be possible. The government has said right from the start that the costs of the program would represent 1 to 2% of the proceeds. We are on track for proceeds within the range that the government laid out 2 years ago of $5 to $7 billion.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
How does the government justify spending around $100 million selling Mighty River Power when just 2.5% of New Zealanders took up the offer? How does he justify spending around $1,000 per retail investor on this sale?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that is a bit rich coming from the member who tried to stop the sale, which would have wasted however many million he thought that it might cost. The government justifies it on the basis that we'll get a better performing company, a better performing electricity market, better investment opportunities, not just for those who bought shares directly, but the 2 million New Zealanders who have KiwiSaver accounts. And we also justify it on the basis that by the end of the week, we will have $1.7 billion in the government accounts available to us to invest in public assets. That is $1.7 billion we have not had to borrow from the foreign bankers who this member seems to be sticking up for. Would he rather have us borrow it from his mates in the foreign banks?
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Louise Upston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Supplementary question.
Supplementary question to the Minister of Finance. Has he seen any reports of the costs of the Labour Greens referendum?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I have seen
order.
Estimates.
I have a point of order.
I fail to see the ministerial responsibility.
And I accept that. I don't believe there is any responsibility at all.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question. Supplementary question. I'll give it to Louise Upston. Louise Upston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
To the Minister of Finance, has he seen any other costs associated with a Labour Greens referendum?
Well, again, I don't believe that's a responsibility. Order. Order. Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that the average retail purchase of Mighty River...
We've still got a level of noise here that's making it hard for me to hear the supplementary question. Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that the average...
Order. Would the member please start for a third...
Given that the average retail purchase of Mighty River Power shares was $8,220, according to the government, yet the typical family has less than $2,000 in the bank. Does he think that the less than 3% of Kiwis who bought shares in this company are a representative slice of middle New Zealand?
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, no, they probably aren't, but that member did his best to make sure that people with $2,000 to spend on this didn't do so by scaring them with his stupid nationalisation policy. However, we are not opposed to average New Zealand households having investments, so we are going to offer them another opportunity to buy shares, and we would hope that the member will this time encourage people with $2,000 to invest in the share floats instead of showing his contempt for their aspiration to make their own decisions.
Supplementary. Supplementary question.
Order. Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is his government's message to the 97.5% of Kiwis who haven't bought shares in Mighty River Power and who now face higher power prices in order to increase dividends to the 2.5%?
Point of order, sir. My apologies to my colleague. Point of order, sir.
Point of order, Materia Ture.
The barracking that's coming from behind me, sir, is making it impossible to hear the question. I'm sitting right next to the questioner. It would be much easier for the whole House to hear if this barracking was made to stop.
There is a level of noise today from all parts of the House that is unacceptable. I don't want to ask anybody to leave. But order. But if the level of noise continues, then I'm going to have to ask somebody to leave the chamber. I'd be reluctant to do that. But at this stage, the noise coming from many quarters of the House is unacceptable, and I think Russell Norman should be allowed to start that supplementary question again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is his government's message to the 97.5% of Kiwis who haven't bought shares in Mighty River Power and who now face higher power prices in order to pay dividends to the 2.5% who have bought shares in these companies? And isn't his government now a government just for the 2.5% and showing contempt to the 97.5%?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, our message to them is, first, the government owns 51% of this company on their behalf, and I expect that within a matter of weeks that 51% will be worth considerably more than it was at the beginning of this year. Secondly, our message to them is that those who manage their KiwiSaver accounts have probably made an investment in this company, and it looks like that could probably be a successful investment. And my third message to them is, if they are approached by parliamentary funded Green staff looking for their signatures, don't sign, because it's a dodgy petition.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it a fair statement of the government's policy to say it cut $2 billion a year in taxes on the wealthy? It then found that the cupboard was bare because there wasn't enough money, so it told us it had to sell assets in order to pay for schools, and then it sold those assets to the very same people to whom it gave the tax cuts.
Honourable Bill English.
No, Mr. Speaker, that's not the case, because none of that is true. But what we would say to them is, even if that was true, even if it was true, the alternative of printing money, nationalising the electricity industry, nationalising the housing construction industry, shutting down our primary production industry would probably lead to less incomes and less jobs, and those are Labor Greens policies.
Question number 4, Kanwat Singh Bakshi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my question is to the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises.